So if you're an enthusiast of Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar has a little bit of this. It does have a little bit. But this is mainly a 40K thing and a Games Workshop thing. I've often said, and this is coming from someone that is an enthusiast of the game, of the narrative, someone that is a member of the community and loves to play weekly, 40K, the only thing that we like as a community more than playing games is complaining about Games Workshop. And there's such an interesting duality with the company to the point of you look at what they produce, their marketing and how it's presented, and there's just this contempt for the community. There's just this thought process of you're going to buy our stuff no matter what because we have a good IP, because we have managed to control that IP and have the community do all the heavy lifting for us and build the community. And there is no real competition. And the slight competition that there was, and we're going to take a look at that got blown up by the very nature of not understanding the license, and it was never a long-term thing. So you have this literal monolith that's Games Workshop that controls 40K, Age of Sigmar, the Games Workshop empire. If you want in the newest releases, the current hotness, and to continue in the hobby, you're going to pay for those limited releases. You're going to pay for that product before it goes out of stock. And on the secondary, maybe you're going to pay the scalpers prices, and you just got to take it and deal with it. Will anything topple Games Workshop? I say yes. Now, this is not the kind of clickbait Games Workshop going out of business, all this type of stuff. Games Workshop is too well established, too well marketed, and has consistent growth in areas outside of the traditional tabletop game that is funneling. You know, they've got that sales funnel. They've got the list, and they're doing it correctly. Looking at BattleTech a number of years back, where BattleTech failed was the core game lost momentum, and the video games kept it alive for a long time. It never diversified out, certainly not taking advantage of the different models that Games Workshop has. And Games Workshop also has crossover. If I play 40K, maybe I'll jump into Age of Sigmar. If I play Age of Sigmar, I'll probably jump into 40K. There's this back and forth to move you. So I don't expect Games Workshop to crumble. I don't expect Games Workshop to make some mistake and it declines over the next 20 years and that's it. That's done. I mean, there was a time, 4th or 5th edition, where you could see Games Workshop needed to kind of course correct, and they did. And at the time, the greatest threat to Games Workshop was the almighty Star Wars. If you look back a number of years, when X-Wing Miniatures 1.0 was just released, this was the triple threat. We've got an IP that everybody knows instantly. It's like a culture. Even if you're not into Star Wars, you know about Star Wars. It's pre-painted, it's easy to play, it's mass marketed, and it's a win-win-win. And you look at, going back a number of years, you look and you see where there was this 40K is number one, 40K is number one, 40K is number one, X-Wing Miniatures is number 4, number 5, number 3, number 2. And for 1 year, it did eclipse Warhammer 40K. I mean, that's massive. Now, X-Wing self-destructed, of course, because it's Fantasy Flight Games, and they killed it with 2.0 to milk more, and just Star Wars not being their IP. That is the strength that Games Workshop has. They own it. But it shows that there are other potential threats. So what do I think is going to be the end of Games Workshop? I think it's going to increase in value tremendously. The IP is going to grow tremendously. I think their marketing tactics of FOMO and limited release, where now just everything's a limited release. It's not even like, look, we're only going to produce this for a short time, or it's marked limited release. Just everything is absolute limited release. You get it now or you're out. That's going to consume and drive where it's going to become so profitable. It's now an extraction machine. Not that it wasn't always an extraction machine, but at least I got some miniatures out of it. I think it's going to become so valuable that it's going to kind of become like Fantasy Flight Games. Some sort of monolith is going to buy up Games Workshop, is going to buy out Games Workshop, and they're just going to ride that IP, milk that IP, just farm it, just absolutely like mine it out, where it will just become another revenue stream, perhaps a steady one, but it won't have the massive growth. It won't have the value. It won't have just what makes something special anymore. Is that too doom and gloom? I mean, what do you guys think? And I don't think we're looking at like 2 years, 5 years, maybe 10, maybe 15. I guess it depends on how much more hype things continue. But I could see things being acquired. I could see the company being sold or transferred or bought out, and it just becomes just another thing to extract, another thing of mainstream culture. Do I dare say Dungeons and Dragons? Not that Dungeons and Dragons is making the money that 40K is, but it was acquired, and now it's just another mass market cultural thing, making a lot of money, but there have been a lot of shifts, whether they're for good or bad, plus or minus, in the Dungeons and Dragons landscape since back in the day when it was TSR, or when it was early looking at D&D, 3rd edition, 3.5, 3.x, to where it is now. I walk down Main Street in White Plains, and no joke, I see people wearing D&D t-shirts. Like, it's just out there. It's just done. That's kind of where we are. So I see Games Workshop eventually becoming so profitable where an offer is made that cannot be refused. And I think at that point things shift, and it just becomes another mass consumer type innovation. I mean, your thoughts on that and what it would take to topple, and I should say by topple, change the culture of Games Workshop to where it's now just a mass market paperback.